Hi, so the main message of this vlog today is that I want to show that to determine a capacity issue you only need to have a positive test outcome in one or more screenings or tests. One positive test means one capacity issue, and so on and so forth. However, in order to show that something is a skill issue, you cannot do that simply by screening for capacity issues and rule out one at a time, as there are so many specific capacity issues. So the only true way, or the most efficient way, to show that something is a skill issue is to fix the problems via coaching, cueing, or practicing. First, we see Anne, who is a bench press athlete. She initially presents with a shallow but otherwise stable squat technique. At full depth, we see a heel raise and some instability. And cueing this did not solve anything. After this, I chose to screen for capacity issues. There were no positive results in the rock back squat for hip back dissociation or hip mobility. After that, I went over to test for ankle mobility, where we found a positive result of limited ankle dorsiflexion, as she is not able to hit the box with her knee. This suggests that she has the specific capacity issue of limited dorsiflexion in the ankle, which is supported by the heels elevated back squat, where we now see with the added ankle dorsiflexion that she is able to hit a deep squat, a stable squat with good control and within the technical model. This is also supported by the fact that during the first squat, Anne said that it almost cramped on her shin. You can also see the tibialis anterior tendon during the ankle tests contracting, or the muscle contracting and the tendon tightening up, showing that she's using a lot of force from the tibialis anterior to get into that ankle dorsiflexion. So all this proves that she does present with a capacity issue of ankle dorsiflexion. It does not rule out a skill issue. Just because I was not able to cue it does not mean another coach is unable to. Next up, we see Maria. She's a beginner. Once again, we see a shallow squat. We also see excessive lumbar extension and some instability due to maybe due to the eccentric speed. Since she's a beginner, I suspect that to be skill issues, so I would try to cue her first, and I provide the following: a wider stance with the feet pointed slightly out due to her initial stance being very narrow. I ask her to posteriorly tilt the pelvis before the descent to avoid the excessive lumbar extension and to provide more hip flexion range of motion. Then I ask her to drop straight down instead of back with her hips and to slow down the descent. This removed most of the instability and lumbar extension. To remove the depth issues, I asked her to go as far as possible on the way down. And now she presents with a deep squat that is controlled and aligned with the technical model. Interestingly, she displays an ankle dorsiflexion similar to Anne, which might mean that she does have a capacity issue in the ankles, but it's one that she successfully manages. So in summary, we proved through cueing that Maria had a skill issue. However, we did not rule out any capacity issues which she might display with. For Anne, we proved that she does have a capacity issue, since the manipulation of ankle dorsiflexion capacity improved her squat. However, we did not rule out any skill issues. Now, on to the strict press. First, we see Christina. From a side view, we see a well done strict press with no excessive lumbar extension, where only the bar maybe does travel a bit far back and she could just push more straight up. From the front view, we see that the elbows abduct just a tad too early. We would like to see her keeping the shoulder flexion movement a bit more or for a bit longer. And we do see some side-to-side symmetries which also shows as some inclination of the bar on the way up. I was not able to cue away the abduction and asymmetries, so I looked at her capacities. Looking at her scapuloglenohumeral rhythm, we see that when the arms are down by her side, her right scapula is retracted and elevated, and when she does have her arms overhead, we see a decreased external rotation. The decreased protraction and external rotation does increase the requirements of the glenohumeral range of motion. And to compensate for this, she probably has some increased activation of her trap 1, which is why we see an elevated scapula on the right side. It should be noted that the athlete has a history of impingement syndrome. These findings supports what we see from the front view in the strict press. A more elevated and retracted scapula on the right side will mean that we have an elevated shoulder on the right side, and that the right upper arm will be closer to the right ear. Interestingly, the athlete is not able to flex her shoulder above 90 degrees when imitating a shoulder press in the sagittal plane. This movement comes primarily from the scapula, and from the 90 degrees she has to abduct the arm to go overhead. This explains why she has this early abduction pattern in the strict press. Now, on to Maria once again. When provided with the 20 kg bar, we see excessive lumbar extension and wrist extension. Also, the primary thing is we see a push press, which could be a force issue or just a misunderstanding from my instructions. When provided with a 15 kg bar, we see the following. Still see the excessive wrist and lumbar extension, which increases when she goes overhead. We also see that the elbows goes behind the bar, and that there is quite a large deviation in bar path in front of her. Since she's a beginner, I do suspect some skill issues, so I cue the following. Posterior tilt the pelvis, keep your ribs down, keep your wrist straight, and keep your elbows below the bar. This provides clear improvements in starting position, the bar path, and the posture. However, we do still see quite a bit of lumbar extension, so I decide to test her shoulder flexion. And as you can see from this video, it is quite limited when asked to keep her ribs down. Right now she does extend at the spine quite a bit. To test if this was the issue that caused the excessive lumbar extension, I provided a physical intervention of active release technique on the pecs and the lats, as well as some FRC drills to improve shoulder mobility. This is the post-intervention results, which in the test of shoulder flexion mobility showed a dramatic improvement. However, the change in this strict press was quite minimal. This can either mean that a decreased shoulder flexion capacity does not limit her strict press, or it can mean that the improvement was insufficient and a bigger one is needed to elicit the functional results in the strict press. My bet would be on the last one. In summary, we found that Christina most likely had a capacity issue in the scapuloglenohumeral complex, which caused her to abduct a tad too early and show asymmetries in the front view. Skill issues, however, cannot be ruled out. In Maria, we proved through cueing that there was a skill issue present. However, most likely she is also presented with a capacity issue of decreased shoulder flexion, and if the skill requires a 20 kg bar, decreased force production.